Great pleasure. First of all, thanks to the UDRI Architecture Foundation, the Max Mueller Bhavan Goethe-Institut for hosting this. And I'm particularly thrilled for a few reasons. One is Jerold is a dear friend and a colleague at Harvard University, someone who has been a great advisor being in the planning department there, he was like a mentor when I first joined. So I'm deeply appreciative to him for many things he's done. But I think also in the context of the city, one has always stood here with many of you as part of conversations that have had to do with urban conservation and open space and post-industrial landscapes. And it's interesting that we're here this time with a group of 30 students who are part of a real estate program. And Jerold, the contribution he's made is over the last few years, he's really crafted a new real estate program for the School of Design with the argument that most real estate programs are situated in business schools, which is really about number crunching, profit, without any sensitivity often to the environment, to urban form, to architecture. And how could we actually mentor, nurture a generation of real estate advocates, in a sense, who could make this bridge, which is situate real estate within the larger planning discourse, which is what's really missing, because real estate becomes an activity by itself. And I think we can see it in our city. There are some developers who are more mindful of this, but the general culture, codes, and aspirations lead to a completely disjointed city in terms of urban form, because real estate as a practice is detached from urban planning or urban design. And so this is the program, which is, it's very hard to get a degree program in a university like that. It has to be taken through many, many procedures. And Jerold is the founder director now, and he has crafted this wonderful program, which is a year old. The first batch of students are with us in the room. He's the Frank Backus William Professor of Urban Planning and Design, and like I said, the founding director of the real estate program. He's also chaired the Department of Urban Planning. His teaching, scholarship, and practice address issues of land use and environmental law, public and private real estate development, public space, urban disasters, climate change, design competitions, and cultural space. In fact, his most recent book, which is in progress, is a book on the future of cultural space, which he's co-authoring with co-editing with Robin Kelsey, who's the Dean of Arts and Humanities at the Faculty of Arts and Sciences at Harvard University. His other books include Privately Owned Public Space, the New York Experience, Urban Disasters, Resilience, New Dimensions from International Practice in the Built Environment, Landmark Justice, the Influence of William Brennan on America's Communities and Zoning, and The American Dream, Promises Still to Keep. So he's sort of written really broadly in terms of subjects. As an urban planner and lawyer, Professor Kayden has advised governments, non-governmental organizations, real estate owners, developers, as well as owning and overseeing his own real estate assets. So he has grounded experience. He's argued in court and written amicus briefs for the United States Supreme Court cases and served as an expert witness. He'll touch upon some of that. He's drafted laws on inclusionary housing, public space, land reform, and land use in the United States and elsewhere, and worked with agencies all the way from the World Bank to the International Finance Corporation, the United States Agency for International Development, and many others, which has taken him to China, Russia, Nepal, Ukraine. In fact, he was senior advisor for land reform for the government of Ukraine, which was sponsored by the USAID, and he worked there besides with the Dutch government and a whole lot of international sort of engagements. He has served since 1991 as Principal Constitutional Counsel to the National Trust for Historic Preservation in Washington, D.C. And he founded and leads, and this is going to be, I think, part of what he's going to talk about, leads Advocates for Privately Owned Public Space, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to encouraging public use of privately owned spaces, public spaces. And he serves on the boards of the Juilliard School and the Hamilton Partnership for Patterson. In fact, he also has a parallel career in music. He's a composer. For our last President Larry Backus' inauguration, he composed the score for that whole ceremony. He was also a partner of Owen Jones, who handled Michael Jackson, the first 3 major concerts. And Jerold Kayden actually made it to the cover of Rolling Stones. Was it the cover, Jerold? Was it the cover? No, it wasn't the cover, but he made it in the pages of Rolling Stones. But on his shoulder was Bubbles, who was Michael Jackson's chimp. He wasn't with Michael Jackson. But he has sort of been in that world of music. And among Professor Kayden's honors are that he's a Guggenheim Fellow, and he has awards from the Association of Collegiate Schools of Planning, the American Bar Association, the American Society of Landscape Architects, and the Environmental Design Research Association, and multiple fellowships from the National Endowment of the Arts. At the design school, he was recognized school-wide as the Teacher of the Year, and he has earned his undergraduate, law, and city and regional planning degrees from Harvard University, and subsequently served as a law clerk to Judge James Oakes of the U.S. Court of Appeals and the Second Circuit, and Justice William Brennan, Jr. of the U.S. Supreme Court. So that's the range of the work Jerold has done. And his focus these days is planning, real estate, and how to situate real estate in the larger urban planning discourse. Jerold, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you. I really want to speak about Raoul Mehrotra very briefly. I mean, everything he said about me, right back at you. He's been a fantastic colleague, a fantastic friend. He's added enormously to Harvard University. He's 2 doors down from me in the hallway. I can't think of a better, in fact, there isn't a better colleague. It's not as if there are others equal. And of course, he's a fantastic architect, urban designer, urban planner, thinker, writer. So thank you, Raoul, for this invitation. I really appreciate it. I also want to thank the sponsors of this event. I know I just have one down here, the Urban Design Research Institute. I know there are 2 others, the Goethe-Institut and the Architecture Foundation. And actually, it's below this on the slide. No, that's not true. I just didn't put it up there, and I apologize for that. Okay, I'm going to talk about something that, after being here for 5 or 6 days, strikes me as interesting for Mumbai. I'm not going to claim that I'm giving Mumbai lessons about what it should do with its city. But I do think, on a comparative basis, there might be some insights and some interest with this sort of material. So I've entitled this Trading FSI for Privately Owned Public Space. I will tell you that FSI is particular to India as a term of art. There are other countries that speak about FAR, or floor area ratios, rather than floor space index. They're all essentially the same sort of thing. It's basically this idea of trading a larger building allowed by government in return for, in this case, privately owned public space. This phenomenon is worldwide. As you can see, the first 2 rows are alliterative. So Tokyo, Toronto, Taipei, Santiago, Seoul, Seattle, San Francisco. But then I ran out of alliteration. So you can get the idea. I mean, it's really around the world. I'm going to talk and focus on New York because I did a particular study in New York. And New York was really the birthplace of privately owned public space. But again, it's around the world. People copied New York. They added to it. They changed it. And so it's not here. The technique, the idea of privately owned public space is not without its friends and not without its critics. This is this was in the days of Twitter as opposed to X. Will Lewis, who happens to be an observer of lots of things urban, wrote, "Love them, hate them, or feel indifferently." And I don't know who feels indifferently. Privately owned public spaces, POPs, exist in cities across the world. So that's, it's just completely accurate. On the love them side, this is in New York City, and it's hugely popular throughout actually the entire year. It's a great outdoor space. And you think about what if this were in Mumbai, or any other city, by the way? Would this be appreciated by people? Would it be a great thing to have it as you walk along the street? Or how about this? This is one of my favorite, probably my favorite privately owned public space in New York City. It's an interior space. It's called a covered pedestrian space. And a number of New York City POPs are actually indoor spaces. Okay. But so that's sort of things that people would say, this is terrific, what a great kind of thing for a city. But there are other people who feel, in fact, that this whole phenomenon of private owners providing public space is deeply problematic. The Guardian has been one of the big critics. There's a reporter there, he keeps writing about how terrible it is that corporations or private real estate owners are providing public space. And so they called it, he called it in the series Revealed, the insidious creep of pseudo-public space in London. So he coined the phrase pseudo-public space, meaning he doesn't even think it's public space. And there are some people who would say you can't have such a thing as privately owned public space. From time to time, I've referred to it as law's oxymoronic invention. It's invented by law, and it's like, hot snow. It's an oxymoron. How can you have a privately owned public space? We'll have to decide as we spend some time with me about whether one could. It's interesting how it evolved. It evolved, as I said, in New York City, and I'd like to take you on a very brief tour of zoning in New York City. And earlier today, we had a sort of similar discussion with the group, but here, this is the Equitable Building in New York as of 1915. Before zoning existed, before land use law existed in New York City and basically in the United States. There had been, by the way, zoning in Germany. Zoning actually was originated in Germany. That's why the Goethe-Institut is sponsoring my talk tonight. Pretty good, huh? All right. So here we are, the Equitable Building. Now, if you look at it, you can just see it actually occupies the entire parcel, the entire lot that it's on, and it goes straight up, actually, to the moon, except it doesn't go to the moon, all right? This building was among the buildings that were cited as reasons to enact a land use law called zoning that would begin to regulate buildings that would be provided by the private sector. Why? Because this building sterilized light and air at street level. Now, you can certainly understand how it might sterilize or prevent light from getting down to the street level, but I've always wondered, I don't wonder because I know the answer, but how can air be a problem at street level? I don't wear an oxygen tank as I walk around the streets of New York. I may wear a mask sometime and things like that. The answer was there was a big public health notion that you had to have air that would move throughout the streets, the breathing lungs of a city, and in fact, if you had these very tall buildings, it would interfere with the movement of air and result in various diseases sort of hanging around and causing epidemics, and there have been epidemics, to be sure. So here we go. 1 year later, the Equitable Building was going up, and there were others, but we have the first comprehensive zoning ordinance in the world. Again, Germany focused on residential. This is really deemed to be the first controlling use of land. Should it be residential, commercial, industrial, institutional? Controlling the shape of buildings on land. How tall should they be? Should they be fat? Should they be thin? Where should they be placed on a lot? And then controlling, finally, the bulk or density. How much of a building can go on a lot? I call this the zoning trio of use, shape, and bulk. Sometimes with my students and others, I say it's the violin, the viola, and the cello of zoning. And then I say, if that confuses you, just drop out and just call it the zoning trio and talk about use, shape, and bulk. So in terms of shape, because this was the critical thing, rather than use or rather than bulk finally, there were two basic rules. One dealing with here, setbacks, and the other is the 25% rule. And these two things combined to create and provide more light and air at street level. So here's a representation by a wonderful artist of the time, Hugh Ferris, of the 1916 zoning ordinance showing setbacks. And you can see the zoning of 1916 created, some people called them wedding cake buildings because they're tiered. Other people called them ziggurat buildings. But this is a perfect representation of the setbacks. So you'd start right on the lot line, the sidewalk. You could go up, you could rise to some extent, then you'd set back, rise, setback, rise, setback. And that guaranteed that there was enough of a plane or angle that could get light and air to the street level. So the 25% rule is exemplified by buildings like the Empire State Building or the Chrysler Building in New York. And you can say, well, you know, I don't see any setbacks there. And the answer is you're right. I mean, at the base, there are setbacks. But in fact, this is a tower. And this tower, this actual thing, covers, if you took it all the way down to the parcel, the lot, it covers 25%, actually a little less than 25% of the lot. If that were the case, then there was no height limit. You could literally, if technology would allow, build to the moon. But of course, technology didn't allow that and still doesn't allow that. So these were the two different rules that govern buildings. And if you look at buildings between 1916 and basically the late 1950s and finally culminating in a change to the zoning in 1961, you'll see a lot of these buildings all throughout New York City and copied elsewhere, by the way. Again, wedding cake, ziggurat, and occasionally these sorts of towers. Well, after World War II, there were several developments which changed the idea of what buildings should be. And by the way, laws tend to respond to conditions, economic conditions, political conditions, style conditions, technological conditions, and that's exactly what happened in the 1950s in New York City. Post-World War II, tenants, who were employers of various companies, started to demand larger floor plates than what had previously been the case. I mean, imagine a wedding cake building. As you go up and up and up, the floor plate decreases in size. You're covering 25% of the lot. That's a very small floor plate. They wanted larger floor plates, larger floors, and they wanted them on upper floors with nice views. And by the way, developers of buildings didn't object to the idea of having larger floor plates on upper floors. You charge the premium rents on the higher floors, and if they were able to be as large as the lower floors, they'd get a lot more money. So that was a pressure from both tenants and owners of real estate. There was the technological invention of, it had been invented earlier, but it spread out, scaled out, of HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, and fluorescent lighting. In the old days, you'd have to be near a window, right, to get the air coming in if it's too hot. You get a breeze coming in. We open the window. That was the old technology. Now you could do it through actual mechanical air conditioning. And fluorescent lighting eliminated or mitigated the need, again, to be near a window where you'd get natural light. Now you could have fluorescent light, as much as we might hate it, going deep into the floor plate. So these two technological changes allowed for reasonable, pleasant floor plates of a large size. And then finally, the international style, modernism, was sweeping the United States. It had come in earlier. We can attribute it to a number of people, but it was part of this whole mix. So the cultural venue of people was beginning to say, hey, we want, and what do? We want this. And this is the Seagram building, one of the most famous international style modernism buildings, finished around 1958. Mies van der Rohe was the architect, a great international style architect, with an assist, by the way, from Philip Johnson. So he worked on the building with him. And the Seagram building, as you can see, doesn't set back. It just rises straight up, on its parcel of land. It's covering only 25% of its lot, which meant it had to have a very, very large lot to produce this. And in fact, the building as a real estate venture did not make money. As an advertising venture, it covered that loss because it was called the Seagram building, advertising liquor and other products associated with Seagram. But it was a money loser as an actual real estate building because it had to have such a large parcel of land. So it's very famous going straight up, no setbacks. But it's also famous for the plaza, which sits right in front of the building, right here. Notice, by the way, all the people who are using it. Actually, that's a sort of classic, the architectural photographer just didn't want people in the image. In fact, it's very, very heavily used, but I thought that sort of gives the clean look of it, but I always like to actually show, what is really happening in life. So this building and the Lever House building, designed by Gordon Bunshaft of Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, which was catty corner across Park Avenue. These two buildings, but particularly Seagram, served as the model for a change in the zoning several years later. Literally, this building and the Lever House building appeared in the consultant's report that actually proposed a new zoning ordinance, and they said, let's legislate for this. And that's exactly what happened. So there were a whole bunch of things that were introduced in 1961 in that amendment to the 1916 ordinance. It's really just a brand new ordinance, the 1961 New York City zoning resolution. And one of the elements in it, among many, many others, was the introduction of something called incentive zoning. You don't find those words in the zoning ordinance ever, but that's what it was, for privately owned public space, or now we can start to call it POPs. And in that 1961 law, it introduced this idea of trading extra floor area that a developer could build in an office building or a residential building, towers. They could get extra rentable or sellable space if they would provide a public space, we call it a privately owned public space, on their land that they own, normally at the base of the building that the public could in fact use. And indeed, the POPs have to be open and accessible to the public. I mean, that's the sine qua non. Without that, it's just not a privately owned public space at all. And they must be open and accessible. This is not the owner doing a favor. By law, they must be. Now, the owner doesn't have to do this. The owner could have said, forget it, I don't want to put a plaza there, and so be it, there's no plaza, but they wouldn't get the extra floor area. So the trade was 10 square feet of bonus floor area for every square foot of plaza, 3 square feet of bonus floor area, extra floor area allowed for 1 square foot of arcade. And the idea of FAR was introduced in the 1961 zoning resolution, which stands again for floor area ratio, and that's the same thing as FSI. By the way, there's a website of a very famous developer right here in Mumbai who has a whole description of FSI, and you get down and it says, how is FSI different from FAR? And it tries to explain a difference. I'm telling you, there's no difference whatsoever. There's a difference in terms of how FSI is actually administered as opposed to how FAR is administered in other cities. But conceptually, they're exactly the same thing. What they are is saying, how much building do you have on a plot of land, and what's the ratio of the building area, and I'm not going to call it the carpet area or the build, there are lots of different definitions worldwide about what is the area in a building. But you take that area in the numerator and you put in the denominator the lot area, and that gives you your floor area ratio, or FSI. So you could get these bonuses. They weren't unlimited. Depending on the size of plaza or arcade you actually provided, you could build your FAR up from 15, which was, by the way, the maximum FAR at that time in New York City. You could go from 15 to 18, 20%, at which point, even if you provided a larger plaza that generated more bonus space, you couldn't actually use it. So that was the cap. By the way, today you have buildings that go up to 21.6, which, by the way, is not just a sort of random number. It's 20% above 18. And then there are some special districts in New York now that you can go to 30 FSI, 30 FAR. Not wildly and uniquely New York. If you want to go to Hong Kong and Singapore, you'll see similar kinds of things. All right, so this is what it produced, incentive zoning. These are the statistics from 2023. And you can just go down and see what kind of spaces there are by type. Arcades, 90 of them in New York City. Covered pedestrian spaces, 15. By the way, Trump Tower, where former President Trump descended on the so-called golden escalators, that was in the Trump Tower covered pedestrian space. The Trump Organization received a floor area bonus for providing that space of, by the way, 90,000 square feet. We'll talk about that a little bit. Elevated plaza, there are only 2, and by the way, a lot of people say they're terrible, they're raised off the street. We don't want that. We want our public spaces at street level. There's a lot of studying and learning about how it's better to have them at street level rather than also sunk. So you can go through the list. I mean, look at this, I love this. There's a plaza type of space, a public plaza, a residential plaza. All of these things are completely different definitionally, although they have the word plaza. And then there are 3-block arcade, 3-block connection, 3-block galleria. By the way, urban plaza, another plaza. So these are all the different kinds legally defined in the zoning resolution of POPs in New York City. So where are they? They're everywhere. I mean, they are concentrated to some degree in Manhattan. New York has 5 boroughs or 5 areas. The Manhattan, which is an island, They're concentrated. These are all, if you really look at them, they're just, all over the place. This is sort of slightly below Midtown Manhattan. This is Midtown. There are lots of pops on the Upper East Side, the Upper West Side, and then if you go all the way down here to Wall Street, to downtown New York, there are a whole bunch of pops there as well. Increasingly, because there have been towers, particularly residential towers, built across the East River in Brooklyn and Queens, you're now seeing a lot of pops popping up in those boroughs. And then the city decided it wanted to have at least one in the Bronx and at least one on Staten Island so it could claim that every borough has a pops, but they're primarily in Manhattan and then secondarily in Brooklyn and Queens across the river. So, good, bad, what's the story? And nobody knew the story. And I had done some writing about pops and about incentive zoning in particular. And it was part of an article I wrote, and it got some play. It really focused on how much bonus floor area was given. But I was also really interested in the amenity, privately owned public space. By the way, incentive zoning has produced legitimate Broadway theaters, affordable housing, subway connections. I mean, there are all sorts of other public amenities that it has in fact created, which would be of interest to people here in Mumbai. But I got really interested in these privately owned public spaces, which is the primary public amenity or public benefit that incentive zoning has produced. And when you get interested in it as a scholar, you end up doing this. You write a book. And that's what I did. I got the city of New York, the chair of the Planning Commission. We were all on a panel together. I remember this. It was at the Municipal Art Society, an NGO in New York, about urban design. We were on a panel. The chair was sitting next to me, and on the other side was the head of the NGO, Municipal Art Society. And I just said, it is outrageous that we don't know, I don't know, you don't know, nobody knows how many pops there are in the city, where they are. How large are they? What amenities do they have? I kid you not, nobody knew. Yes, there was some data, but nobody had the full data. And it wasn't like there was most data, nobody had any idea. Really shocking, from 1961, nobody had kept a record. So they just appeared. And by the way, if they appear and nobody keeps a record, then nobody knows it's a pops, and guess what happens? And we're gonna see what actually happened. So this book I did with them. When I started, the city of New York said to me, I will always remember this, the planner that I was working with, the senior planner, you can't criticize any of the pops in the book. What? I'm writing a book and I can't, but I didn't say anything. By the time we got to the end of the book, I was the author, I wrote every word of it, and it's critical. 3 research findings that I'd like to share with you. These are the 3 fundamental research findings. A lot of pops. I mean, as a technique for generating pops, this did a really good job. Today, there are 598 privately owned public spaces in New York City. Just imagine that, these sort of smallish spaces scattered around Mumbai, scattered around any city around the world where anybody can pop in and just sit down, or if they're chairs, or if they're benches, or go inside and maybe there's an air-conditioned space with food and all these sorts of things. That's terrific. Look at the numbers. Obviously, developers loved this program because just about every single tower, whether it be office or residential, did an incentive zoning deal. They could do many of them as of right. They didn't have to get a negotiation with the city. They just provided the plaza, met the terms of the definition of a plaza, and boom, they got their zoning bonus automatically without intervention of the city. So in the study period that I looked at, 1961 to 2000, which is when my book was published, there were 503. Notice in 2000, 503. Today, 598. Basically, another 100 pops were produced between 2000 and 2023. Median size, not that large, 4,820 square feet. These are not huge parks. These are smallish kinds of spaces that people can pop into. And they're scattered about. I like to refer to it as an archipelago of space. I wish there were a little more of a plan between the spaces. That's something to talk about. I think that was a failure. But they're scattered all around the city. And indeed, if you aggregated them all together, they would represent 82 acres, which is whatever, 35 hectares, covering roughly 10% of Central Park in New York. And that raises the question, would you want another park that was 10% of Central Park altogether? Or is it nice to have all of these spaces scattered about? And that's just a lot of space. Okay, lots of pops were produced, successful in terms of quantity. Second research finding, not so good on quality of POPs. So I was able to rate the POPs with my colleagues at City Planning. We went through and one of the top category, which I say is excellent here, it was called a destination space. It would be a space that if you came from Mumbai to New York and you were sort of interested in urban planning and public planning, you would visit the space. You heard about it, you'd visit. 3% of the 503. 13%, very good, we called them in the book neighborhood spaces, meaning if you were within a 3-block radius of that space, you'd go there on a certain kind of regular basis. There were some spaces that we called hiatus spaces. If you were on the sidewalk and the space was right next to you, you'd pop over into the space maybe and sit down. If you were across the street, you wouldn't cross the street to go to that space. So that was okay, not great, but at least it wasn't terrible. Marginal. 4 out of 10 spaces were marginal. Now, I had to fight the city of New York to be able to say they were marginal, because a synonym is bad, but the city said, no, let's call them marginal. They're not good spaces. Could they be adapted? Maybe we can talk about that, but they were bad spaces, full stop. And 4 out of 10 bad spaces produced by a program that's meant to produce spaces, and remember, all of the developers have received money because they've received extra floor area. So how could this have happened? Well, okay. So I said 13% were, 16% were, excellent or very good destination or neighborhood spaces. And you can see, you look at what you've got here. People are sitting, it's lovely, it's wonderful to have that. And a lot of these spaces are actually heavily used. That's, again, very, very nice. By the way, the regimented, I love this here. Everybody is sitting regimented. If you tried to move one of these chairs, a guard would come over and say, I'm sorry, you can't move the chair, which I tried once and the guard came over. Here's a neighborhood space. It's just, it's nice to have that in a neighborhood, in a very dense city, that you can just drop by and sit there, meet your neighbors, read a book, read a newspaper. You get the idea, we all do. But 41% were marginal. So the question obviously is why? And the answer is not evil developers. Maybe they were evil, maybe they are evil, but that's not the reason. It's bad law. In terms of the actual design of the spaces themselves, developers did nothing wrong unless you say following the letter of the law is doing something wrong. By the way, they did do something wrong, the owners later, and we'll get to that in a moment. But in terms of this, bad law, undemanding legal standards for POPs in the zoning, ambiguous legal standards in the zoning for POPs. Here, these are the definitions. I can read them. I hate reading PowerPoint slides because you can all read them, but I'm going to do this once because actually, look at this, a plaza. Okay, remember, the developers got 10 square feet of bonus floor area for every square foot of this. It's an open area, accessible to the public at all times, okay, not less than 10 feet deep. So it had to be at least 10 feet deep from the publicly owned sidewalk, measured from the front lot line. That separates the private parcel from the sidewalk. Not at any point more than 5 feet above, so it could not, I know I talked about elevated plaza, that came later, but it couldn't be more than 5 feet above, nor more than 12 feet below the curb level of the adjoining street. That's it. That's all. Arcade, continue, I'm not even going to read it. So think about this as we now look at images of POPs that meet this definition. This is one of my favorite ones. That's a POPs, okay? Here's the sidewalk owned by the city of New York. Here's the building line, okay? Here's the building. All of this is a plaza. All of this generated 10 square feet of bonus, rentable, or sellable space that's in this building that this owner is making money on every single day. And the owner and the developer did nothing wrong, at least legally. That's the POPs. 41% marginal. I don't think I want to sit there. By the way, there's nowhere to sit. Legal? Gee, that's fantastic. I love it. Allege. Some people call this hostile architecture. This is legal. You're going to see this, by the way, later where it's illegal, but here it's completely legal. So, you know, you have to be wearing, I guess, steel pants or steel skirts or something to sit there. You know, they don't want people to sit there. That's why the spikes are there. Is that, by the way, open and accessible to the public? My lawyer hat says, gee, I'd love to bring a lawsuit about that, but, you know, I haven't. But I've done other stuff with lawsuits. I said ambiguity. You know, this is a plaza. All of this is bonused. Is that open to the public, or is it only open to swimmers? I don't know. I'm not saying it's bad. I mean, it looks nice, but is that a usable space open to the public, accessible and usable by the public? All of this landscaped area is bonused. It's nice, okay? Who is it really nice for? It's nice for the occupants of the building. But you can't, if I went in there and walked in there, which I did, a guard would come over and say, I'm sorry, you're not allowed to walk in there. Well, wait a second, it's a public space. Well, but it has all this landscaping. All right. For many, many years, drop-off driveways were counted as plazas. 10 square feet of bonus floor area in this building for every square foot of this. That's ridiculous. I mean, we could say, oh, it's a hybrid space. You know, it's a drop-off driveway and a public space. No, it's not hybrid. It's a drop-off driveway, full stop. Okay, I showed you this space before. Starting in 1975, which by my calculation is 14 years after the original zoning ordinance with all these definitions existed from 1961. Starting in 1975 with zoning amendments. By the way, you know, encouraged by one of the great urban thinkers, observers, sociologists, although not trained with a PhD. Some of you may have heard of him, Holly White, William H. White, who wrote a wonderful little book called The Social Life of Small Urban Spaces. Some of you may have heard of Jan Gehl. He's the successor to Holly White and consults around the world on, you know, what kind of public space what should be provided. But, you know, all of this is the result of amendments that started to require ledge seating, require movable seating, require, in some cases, public art, lamps that were nice, there might be food, trees, landscaping. All of these things suddenly became required. Here's another example. Movable chairs required, tables required, food required, sun required, landscape required. And guess what that produces? Yes, that's right, it produces users who are also an amenity to a space. I mean, you can have spaces without people, but these are great spaces. By the way, this isn't true with every single space post-1975. Sometimes food is required or art, sometimes it isn't. But the basic amenities of chairs and sitting areas, that's universally required. I mean, this is just nice to have in a dense urban environment. I can imagine, you know, when we were doing things, you know, over the past several days, popping in here and just relaxing with water, just listening to the sound, it, you know, gets rid of street noise, etc. And by the way, the ordinance started to require signs. This is the logo that they used for many, many years. I call it a sort of desiccated piece of broccoli, but that's there. And this sign lists how many linear feet of seating, how many movable chairs, tables, every required amenity is actually listed here. So I or anybody could go there and count up and see if they're making you know, the deal that was there. And there were more and more amendments down the line to ratchet up the requirements for the initial design of the public spaces. So now, generally speaking, they're very, very good. It has never produced what I would call a great space. I wish there was somebody who wanted to do a great space. In fact, not even probably in my view, the greatest small public space, 4,200 square feet in New York City, is called Paley Park. Some of you may have heard of it. It's a privately owned private space. But it's open to the public because the owner has decided to give this as a gift to New Yorkers and to people who come to New York. Okay, third research finding. 50% of buildings privatized their POPs in violation of applicable legal requirements. So these are the evil owners, okay, as opposed to just following the letter of the law. This is illegal. What you're going to see now is illegal, against the law. And it fell into three categories in terms of what owners did. They would deny access to a POPs, even though it has to be open and accessible to the public. There would be encroachment by private uses onto the space, privatizing what should be open and accessible public space. And finally, they would remove required amenities. So let me show you some examples. This is, you know, look at this. Where's the POPs? You know, that gate is closed. So I went up to the building worker here. It's still, there's no pops there. It's, you know, the gate is still locked. Aha, now it's open. And suddenly there's a pops there. Why? Because it's open. And to have this, you know, as an open pops is very, very nice. If it's locked and that was illegal, there's no pops. So it's either yes or no. And this is a nice yes to have. Physical barriers. So remember I showed you the water element? So this is in back of the water element. Here's the building, and they put this physical barrier there. So again, unless you're a swimmer, you couldn't use that space at all. There was just no place to actually go. Never-ending construction. This is one of the two elevated plazas in New York. You can't really see it here, and we have lights on, but there are escalators here that go up. And the escalators broke, and for 2 years, all of us were waiting for a part to arrive from Germany. 2 years. So this was there for 2 years. The space was off limits for 2 years. By the way, in this building, it's not as if for those 2 years they stopped renting the bonus space. They continued to make money on the bonus space, but the public didn't have its public space because of that, you know, damn it all, the German not providing, you know, ridiculous. I don't believe it at all. The law didn't, by the way, specify, you know, visible signage. I mean, this is where you have to be really smart as a drafter of law. I've drafted a lot of laws, including laws dealing with public space. You can't say, just put it on the side of the building or on the side of the plaza, or, you know, or even discretionarily. You should say, if you're drafting the law, that the sign telling the public that it's a public space must be visible by everybody walking by on the sidewalk. I don't care how you do it. That's a performance standard rather than saying, put it on the wall. This was not coincidentally placed there. And by the way, this would grow up and cover the sign. I will say, however, that this sign was stolen by people. For a while, people were stealing brass plaques or signs from pops. That's not the owner's fault. Second, encroachment by private uses. Hooters, not my favorite restaurant, but they are actually putting their tables and chairs and little palm trees out here illegally. That's public space. By the way, if you're a person and you don't have money and you sit here, you'll be kicked out unless you're willing to buy something. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, you know, cafe creep, brasserie brolge, trattoria trickle. Okay, clever alliteration and all that. I love cafes. I mean, there's nothing wrong. And in fact, I don't mind enlivening a public space with a cafe and maybe having less actual public space. But I will tell you this, it's got to be done legally. It's got to be done in terms of actual review by public authorities, by public planners. And this is completely illegal. This is one of my favorite ones. This restaurant was completely illegal. By the way, that's where the Apple store now is, on right across from the Plaza Hotel in Central Park. This restaurant was there for years and years and years, completely illegally. I knew it, the city planning staff knew it, and it was sort of like, well, it's there. And I'd say, we can't allow this. And it just stayed there. You know, it was totally odd. This is really one of my favorite ones. This is an illegal department store. This space here was by law required to be free of all retail sales activity. I don't think so. So I remember going in there when my book came out with the New York Times reporter who did a big front page story on the book and the study. And, you know, I was taking photographs and a guard came up to me and said, I'm sorry, you're not allowed to take photographs in this space. And I said, well, you're not allowed to have your department store in this space. Of course, he didn't even begin to comprehend that, and I fully get that. I mean, I wouldn't either. But, you know, it's a sort of bizarre interchange. This kiosk selling Trump memorabilia in Trump Tower, illegal, encroaching on privately owned public space. And then I mentioned removal of required amenities. Remember I showed, you know, hostile architecture, spikes on ledges. Unlike that other one where nobody was required to provide seating, it's nasty concrete ledge seating, but this spike is illegal. This counts as actual required ledge seating, so that's just completely illegal. So, all right, here's, you know, another example of removal of required amenities. The Trump organization actually removed this wonderful public bench. And it was always wonderful. A lot of people would come in. You know, you're shopping on Fifth Avenue, you got your shopping bags, and you just want to sit down and relax. There was this 22-foot bench that was there, and just always had a lot of different kinds of people there. By the way, that's the escalator that he descended on. Okay. Now, there's another story that's interesting as well, and that's use of FSI, or incentive zoning, FAR bonuses, to obtain POPs. I'm not going to go through the economics of all of this, but owners, developers got and used 20.7 million square feet of bonus floor area in return for 598 POPs. And 15 FARs went up to 18, 10 FARs went up to 12, etc. Now, I'm going to just tell you, this is a huge oversubsidy. And I'm just going to give you the final numbers, which are this. The bonus square feet, you know, totals $9 billion. The $9 billion figure is net of the cost of operating the 3.8 million square feet of POPs. So the profit booked by the developers and owners of these buildings was $9 billion. So they got $9 billion to provide these spaces. I don't know. That's a lot of money, it seems to me. And the New York Times recently did, you know, I worked with them very, very closely. I think this is in July of 2023, this huge, you can go online and look. New Yorkers got broken promises. That's the, you know, the illegally provided spaces, and developers got 20 million square feet. So why did this happen? Well, first of all, planners thought it's a free lunch. We're not paying for it. Mayor thought it was a free, not all public people were not paying to provide privately owned public space. No public money is involved. Developers are just providing it, free lunch. But we also know that there's no such thing as a free lunch. But they didn't worry about that additional aspect. They thought POPs were worth it. And by the way, I do too. I mean, some people have said, you're an advocate for privately owned public space. That's the name of your NGO. It is, APOPs. But I said, no. I'm an advocate for public use of privately owned public space, but the acronym would be sort of too long and nasty. But a lot of them are worth it, and you know, they thought it was. And also, finally, in terms of the amount of bonus given, the city never did any financial analysis. They simply didn't do any real estate financial analysis. For 28 years, I've been teaching a course called Public and Private Development, and part of that is to teach public sector staff and officials how to do real estate financial analysis so that they know what they are giving to the private sector. By the way, the private sector developers, they always know. That's what they do. That's what they eat for lunch, and it's not a free lunch. That's what they do every minute of every day when they're working on real estate. But the public sector has always thought, we don't need to know that. That's not what we're about. If it's a good space, that's all we need to know. Answer, not really. And I say, does that matter? Yes. You know, FARs and infrastructure capacity. The whole idea of limiting bulk is tied, at least broadly speaking in physical planning terms, to the amount of infrastructure. The sidewalks, the streets, water and sewer, etc. So if you give more FAR than you would need to give to get the POPs, you're burdening the infrastructure unnecessarily. We're already going from 15, which was deemed to be the correct balance between size of building and infrastructure, up to 18. And we, a city, are willing to do that as long as we get a plaza. And by the way, plazas could be viewed as somehow addressing the extra density. It's a little weird, you know, you say, we'll allow you to legally violate and build a bigger building as long as you provide infrastructure at the base of your building, a plaza, that addresses the extra density. It's sort of a little weird if you think about it. But in any event, you know, give the least amount of FAR necessary to get the developers to provide these POPs so that you don't tax infrastructure capacity unnecessarily. Another basic thing, you know, developers should just not be getting windfalls, and that's what they were getting. Again, they didn't do anything wrong. It's bad, you know, work at the time on the part of the city. Then there's this whole issue of zoning for sale. I mean, people here talk about FSI and premium FSI and all this sort of stuff. And zoning for sale, that's really what this is. By the way, that's premium FSI, is basically selling development rights. And there's something a little bit wrong, a lot of people feel about that. It can undermine, as I say, the ultimate confidence in the system. The sky is for sale. You know, just pay your money and build, maybe you can build a 100-story building or 200 as long as you pay money for it. By the way, that's what happens in Sao Paulo, Brazil. They have something called CPACs, and they downzoned areas, and then they sold the right to build bigger. And then, by the way, some people would have a certificate that they could transfer, sort of transfer of development rights to others, so they could build larger. Okay, let me conclude with some key lessons learned. Sort of, I've already said it. Right design standards that account for owner self-interest. The fox is guarding the hen house. Okay, fine. We're willing to do business with the private sector if we're on the public side. But draft laws that guarantee that the sign will always be visible. Draft laws that guarantee that the chairs will actually always be there. Draft laws, it requires a clever lawyer planner. It can be, by the way, just a planner. It doesn't have to be a lawyer, but it's got to be smart. Okay, I've said it already. Do real estate financial analysis to properly calibrate the zoning bonus. That's not for the private sector. The public sector has to be smart with these deals. Formalize monitoring and enforcement. You got 600 POPs out there. First of all, remember in 2000, the city had no idea how many POPs were out there, so it couldn't monitor, it couldn't enforce, it just literally didn't know, and we had to find out. But formalize monitoring and enforcement by putting in the law a system for, indeed, looking at the spaces on a regular basis, periodic inspections, and enforcing the requirements for the space. So here's the saga of Trump Tower, the public bench. By the way, this could be the first line in my obituary, all right? So the public bench is there, you know, I showed you that before, okay. So what actually happened is that public bench was removed by the Trump organization, and this sales kiosk was put in there in place of it, all right? Oh, and it was selling, you know, Trump memorabilia. There was, by the way, another sales kiosk as well selling Trump memorabilia. Totally illegal. I knew it. Several of the planners at the city knew it. Nobody else knew it. And it just continued to exist again and again and again. So when Donald Trump descended the escalators, which are behind this image, and announced that he was running for president, I took that as an opportunity to actually get the public bench back and get the sales kiosks removed. Not because Trump was uniquely bad on this, because there are a lot of other, remember, there were 50% of buildings with POPs were out of compliance with applicable legal requirements. But I thought it would be a good example. I took advantage of the fact that he was running for president, and it got a lot of publicity. So first that's where the sales kiosk was. I got that removed. And there were these hearings before something called the Environmental Control Board. I was the lawyer. I worked with the building department of the city of New York on this. There were 5 hearings. The first hearing, the Trump lawyer shows up, the Trump representative shows up and then says, oh, I don't have a lawyer. Okay, the meeting was postponed for a month. The second, same thing, postponed for a month. At the third hearing, a month later, okay, Trump's lawyer shows up, named, by the way, for those of you who are interested, Michael Cohen. So I had a very nice conversation with him. He's Trump's lawyer. He's famous in the United States. Talked about baseball, his son, things like that. And he just admitted, no, you know, we're not required to have a public bench there. And the judge said, well, can you prove it? Because we had all the documents that said, no, you are required. He said, well, our lawyer died and the documents went with the lawyer. I guess they were cremated or buried with the lawyer. Ridiculous, there was no such thing. And the judge said, well, I'll give you another month. No, that's not necessary. So finally, the triumph. Now, it's not a great bench, but it's 22 feet long and it's there, and the Trump organization didn't want it to be there. So I felt very, very good. The Trump Tower organization was also fined about the missing bench, you know, and by the way, the fine was $14,000. You know, by the way, Donald Trump was just fined $425 million. I'm not suggesting that that would have been the appropriate fine, but you know, this is just a cost of doing business. But the organization was embarrassed about this. So finally, this got a huge amount of publicity, front page of the Times. You know, my photograph was in there and all of this. The mayor got involved, the city council, and they asked me to help them draft a law, which I did, and it now requires the city to periodically visit every single POPs in the city at least once every 3 years. Signs have to be placed in every single POPs, including POPs that never had a requirement for a sign. And then the city planning department has to provide to the city council and the mayor every single year a list of all the POPs and all the requirements. And the buildings department has to provide a list of all of the violations by building owners every single year. So now everybody's keeping that data. Fourth lesson, keep the records. And by the way, do it when it starts. I can tell you, this took 2 years, and what we had to do for every single space, we created a public space record. And I'll just show you, 5 pages. It took an enormous amount of time, and it wasn't just copying things, it was making judgments. Plans were missing. It was unclear what was or wasn't required of the bonus. It took us an enormous amount of time with judgment to do this. 2 years with 4 of us actually working on it. I wouldn't say full time, but at least half time. Do it at the start. Promote public use. I mean, there's nothing better for good public space than public use. I have a web page. I mentioned my NGO, apops.mas.org. It has photographs of all of the spaces. It lists all of the requirements for the spaces. It has a description of all the spaces, a site plan for all the spaces. But most importantly, for me, I don't want to give information. I want to get information, and it's crowdsourcing. So people put down comments about the spaces. This space was locked or closed, and so you really get an enormous amount of information. One of my favorite ones was at my favorite space, the covered pedestrian space that I showed you at the beginning. A guard came over to a math professor who, with his 8-year-old son, was playing chess on a little tiny magnetic chessboard. And the guard came over and said, "I'm sorry, there's no game playing in this space, so you can't do this." That's sort of ridiculous, okay? So he posted that information online. I called the executive vice president of the company that owned that and said, "Isn't this ridiculous?" "Oh, yes," and nothing changed, but that's okay, I made a call. Another public publicity event promoting public use, we did a logo competition to replace the broccoli, which you see there, with this. And, I'm not wild about this. I chaired the jury. It was my idea. I didn't get the logo that I wanted, but I was outvoted. But in any event, that brought a lot of publicity. 608 people from around the world submitted logos. That kind of thing is great. Encourage upgrading of existing POPs. This may not look terrible, but it was a terrible space. And $27 million later, this is what you get at Lincoln Center. Lincoln Center adopted the space and spent, as I said, that amount of money to create this. This was all done by famous architects, Billy Chin and Todd Williams. Address inequality. Incentive zoning axiomatically relies on the market. That is to say, there has to be a demand for the extra space, or else the developers wouldn't build it. Well, guess what? In poor areas, there's no demand not only for the extra space, there's no demand for any space. So the towers are not built there. So you don't get all of these public spaces in areas that are poor. So you need to address, in my judgment, inequality. And these kids were playing there, but they lived in a poor neighborhood. And there should be POPs in those poor neighborhoods. So imagine giving a zoning bonus in Midtown Manhattan or in the high-end areas in Mumbai, and that money is used to create a space in a poor neighborhood 3 kilometers away. Nothing really wrong with that. So as I said, grant zoning bonuses in return for off-site POPs in poor neighborhoods or using transfer of development rights. Finally, designate a POPs advocate. And interestingly, there are some positions that have been created recently. This is from New York City. They actually appointed one person to be the first ever, as you can see, Chief Public Realm Officer, dealing not just with POPs, but with parks and all sorts of other things. In Australia, this is in New South Wales, a friend of mine became Minister for Public Spaces. How marvelous to think about it that way. And there can be NGO advocates as well. There I am in my website and with my Advocates for Privately Owned Public Space group. So look, public space, crucial for cities. That's part of really what cities are, whether we call it the public realm or public space. And it should be for everybody, not just rich, not just middle income, but everybody throughout a city. And that raises the question, and it's just a question, what about Mumbai? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jerold. Before we open it up for questions, leave your slide, because I'm going to use your slide to, just ask the first question. And I don't even expect an answer, but the 3 sort of things that sort of come to mind. was, I think it's interesting how you pegged, sort of in passing, but you made a point of it, is that FSI and its relationship to infrastructure, correct? I mean, FSI was meant to create that correlation, right? It's sort of gone into another realm of metrics of finance, and it cross-subsidizes things and goes somewhere else. We struggle with it. What is carrying capacity? We are trying to find the words for it, but actually, FSI, in its origin, aspiration was about some form of equity to landowners, but also relationship to infrastructure. Correct? Here, I mean, in Mumbai more than New York, it's completely gone into another realm. So I'd like you to reflect on that. So second is, public space. So public space, as you've seen, because this is your first visit to Mumbai, it's much fuzzier. I mean, you're trying to get people to use space. We're trying to do the opposite, right, or to calm it down. And so that fuzziness exists. And as a result of that, everything we've seen, we've visited so many new projects. I mean, I kind of am empathetic to both sides, but a developer who is trying to create amenities, and so then you get the kind of gated community, because whether it's the middle class or the upper classes, they're trying to create amenities, and then the disparity between that inside and outside is great. And the spaces that you're creating are spaces that are intended to make that fuzziness, that blur. Again, just impressions to these 3 points. I don't expect.
I got 2 points there.
Yeah, okay, so 2 points.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's what So first of all, with regard to FSI, the mic is on. With regard to FSI, FAR, FSI originally were meant to very roughly tie the size of the building, the bulk of the building, the number of people in the building, the demand for water and sewer, sidewalks and roads, tie that to the existing or anticipated infrastructure of streets, sidewalks, all that sort of stuff. So that's the basic idea. It's sort of basic physical planning criteria. All right, fantastic, right? But at the same time in 1961, consultants and then the city decided, well, look, it would be nice to get some plazas and arcades as well. And they could argue that, yes, we're giving extra bonus floor area, larger buildings, but we're going to ask for what they call density ameliorating amenities, to wit, a plaza and arcade. So yes, bigger building, I said this sort of bizarre, you create more of a problem and then you solve the problem that you've created at street level.
So my question, or if I have to make it a chopper question, would be, should we be pulling back to that fundamental?
Well, okay, so I personally don't think so. I think it's up to Mumbai or any other city. I'm hesitant always to advise without knowing a lot more and working with local people. That's why my last slide was, what about Mumbai? I'm not telling Mumbai what it should do. I can imagine, I have lots of thoughts about what Mumbai should do, but I'm not going to tell you because I'm not sure yet. I don't have enough information, and even if I did, I'd still be working with people here. So I'm not that arrogant to say that. You are looking at a government, I'm not saying necessarily in India, around the world that has decided we're not going to be spending money for housing, we're not going to be spending money for enough public spaces, lots of things that used to be paid for by government with strained budgets, etc., and tax revolts, etc. Government pulled away. It happened around the world. It's sometimes called the neoliberal turn. Government turned to the private sector to provide things that in the old days might have been provided by government. So social housing in the old days provided by government. Now we're going to use the private sector. We have that here with SRA developments. Luxury housing right next to a high-rise. That's the high-rise slum rather than the actual slum that was originally there. Okay, fine. So it valorizes all of these things. It's a way of generating money. Do I think it could go too far? Yes, I wrote an article called Zoning for Dollars or Zoning for Sale. I mean, things can be completely unrelated. But if the city decides it wants to have more density, straining the infrastructure to be sure, but it also wants to have more affordable housing, and it's willing to make that trade-off, streets that are more crowded, sidewalks, and yes, maybe it can address that, but let's just assume the streets are more crowded, the sidewalks are more crowded, but we have a lot more affordable housing. Is that an unacceptable trade-off? Is that an unacceptable question that can be answered by a city? I don't think so. And I think that can be determined. Again, New York City, it got 5 extra legitimate Broadway theaters in return for a lot of bonus floor area, almost 1 million square feet. Was that a good deal for the public, you now have 5 extra theaters, but you have an overtaxed area around Times Square. I mean, you can be clever, Raul, about where you give the bonus to make sure, that it's not, too overburdening.
And it could be tied to other forms of social and cultural infrastructure, for example.
Totally. Now, let me answer the second question that you have. Again, these spaces sort of have created a lot of problems. One of the biggest problems around the world is that unhoused individuals, sometimes they're called homeless, but I call them unhoused individuals. And by the way, I never call them homeless, which is so depersonalizing, or unhoused. These are people. They're members of the public. And so they use these spaces, and the owners hate it. The other, by the way, hated user are skateboarders. I mean, skateboarders, go on these ledges and, literally, I'm in a film about skateboarding because they used my book as the Bible for skateboarding, because they can locate where plazas were. So it can create, as any city does, uncomfortable juxtapositions. But that's what a city is. And gated communities, it's funny when you said there are amenities being provided by the big developers here for the community. I bristle a little bit at the word amenity. I just, yes, they are amenities, but they're for the people who can afford to get them. For me, public, all right, I'll throw the word public in front of amenities. I just think it should be an amenity for society, not everything. I mean, I'm not suggesting that we overturn capitalism, et cetera. But I am suggesting that we deal with the reality now of relying on the private sector to meet a variety of societal needs. And as part of that, I would suggest public space can be, in fact, provided. And that's what's happened around the world. And so I want the public sector to do a great job guaranteeing that the developers, the private sector, meet the terms of the deal so that the public interest is advanced to the maximum extent possible.
Great, thanks. So we should open up to questions. Introduce yourself briefly and so we know where. Hello.
I know you know me, but I'm Dr. Udwadia. Raul has built me a lovely house in Alibag, which is a village in the outskirts across the bay. Now, I thought of this.
And he's also the one who identified or has written about drug-resistant TB, which we heard a lot about in this SRS.
Are we allowed to mention it? Okay.
So there was a small space at the entrance to this house, about the size of this stage. And when the house was coming up, the village sarpanch, is the most powerful person in the village, came up to me and said, look, this land has been used by generations for their holy land. Holi is a festival which they have once a year. And you must give this land up to the village. He was arm twisting really, didn't want to start the new house off on a sour note. So I said, okay. So this was our public space really, privately owned public space. So maybe you could call me Pops. I can't tell you how it is a good and a bad thing in many ways. A good thing because neighbors do literally, the poor villagers actually come across, sit down there. We sometimes interact with them. I have a free clinic just beneath that, just besides that. And they come to my clinic once in a while and sit there. But at festival time, it's just taken over. There's a cacophony of noise like there is all across Bombay. There are weddings held there. So as Rahul hinted, it can be a bit of a blessing and a bit of a curse when you do open up private spaces to the public. But I thought of that as you gave your lovely talk.
It's a great story. Cities are a blessing and a curse. I'm not, we can talk about each individual example.
Sure.
They're messy. I mean, that's why people move to the suburbs, to have green space and away from people. That's why they move to gated communities.
That's why I did, yes.
And I'm not arguing, I'm not saying to somebody you've done something wrong, all right? What I am saying is if there's a deal, financial deal, now I'm not going to talk about whether you had a financial deal in order to get your house built, but if there's a financial deal in which the developers actually got all this extra money effectively, provide the space and do a good job with it. And by the way, these are multi-family buildings. I live on a 1/4-acre parcel of land in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I don't want anybody sitting on my front lawn during holidays or not during holidays, okay? So I get it, we all get it. We all want, by the way, how about your living room? I don't want somebody in my living room, and I have a right to say, no, you can't come into my living room. So the question is, yes, there is private property, private space, that's terrific, but then there are these deals that are out there that are meant to serve sort of everybody.
answer a question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Introduce yourself.
My name is Charvi Madhu. I'm an architect and designer, and I have been, I stumbled upon privately on public spaces when I was doing my master's at Kamaraja, and I was quite intrigued by this idea, and at that time it seemed like the answer to everything in the world, especially when it comes to the idea of talking about streets, talking about climate change, talking about women and inclusive, walkability, last mile connectivity. I was so intrigued by it, and I kept reading about it. And over the years, it's been almost 10 years now, and over these past few years, I've approached the BMC and I've approached the NMMC. BMC absolutely loved the idea. There was a small span of time where the corporation was working at developing, they call it tactical urban spaces, and they really liked the idea. But when I had a one-on-one, they said that, okay, what Rahul also mentioned, that how do you manage this trading of land, especially when we are running out of this resource, which is land, which is so scarce and so important at this point in time. So they very clearly told me that, okay, we are the richest, we do have a lot of money, but we do not have the money to make it for people, for spaces like these. But we love the idea, and we were in the newspapers, and we were very happy. Then I thought, okay, let me talk to NMMC, which is the Navi Mumbai Municipal Corporation.
Get to the question more sharply.
Sure, yes. So the part being that how do we break down the incentives? So NMMC came up with the idea that how do we break down the FSI? Because the FSI in India, in Mumbai, is a very blanket concept. So we kind of spoke about, let's say if you're giving and opening up your marginal open spaces, specifically only commercial plots, right, and not residential, which is what we're talking about, that we wouldn't want people sitting in our residential spaces. So let's say commercial spaces, and then that is when we spoke about smaller incentives. And they were like, okay, so if you can give a street and open up your boundary walls and allow people to pass through it, okay, we'll give you a rebate in property tax, or in water bill, or in electricity bill. So I think that is how slowly and steadily Mumbai and Navi Mumbai can kind of come to face with reducing these many public spaces.
So you're talking about incentives, right?
Right, yes.
So if you want to use incentives for public space, FSI incentives, and that's your goal, just public space, then you'd have to remove the schedule of so-called premium FSIs, which deal with specific kinds of things that are done. There's a whole schedule, it's very complicated. In New York and elsewhere with FAR, it's not complicated at all. It's just, you get bonus floor area if you provide what we ask for. And we're just asking for a plaza. Maybe we're asking for affordable housing. And it's fungible. If we're happy for you to provide affordable housing, we're happy for you to provide a public space. Or there can be preferences built in. We'll give you more incentive for affordable housing. But, it's very uncomplicated. Mumbai has one of the most complicated, if not the most complicated, FAR systems in the entire world. It's called FSI, and it's sort of nuts. And if you, again, look at I won't say which developer, but that developer, the people who did the website, has it wrong. There's no difference between the two. FSI measures, size of building to the lot. FAR measures size of building to the lot. There may be different definitions of what counts as, in the building. You guys talk about carpet, right? Carpet space. We don't have that world. Or built up area. We don't have that. These are all terms of art. But it's absolutely the same kind of thing. It's just that as administered, it has layered on all these sorts of things that end up creating form of buildings, which is very, very odd. So I'm not saying you could strip away all of those sorts of things. If I were you, I'd get some newspaper reporter to write a story, as he has been doing for years and years and years. He's sitting right next to you, and flail away like Don Quixote. Will anything change? I don't know. Let me say one other thing, by the way. There is a tension between different kinds of public amenities. So there are public space advocates, and they want to use incentive zoning for public space. There are affordable housing advocates, and they want to use incentive zoning for affordable housing. Now, do you think they love each other? They don't. Why? Because if you use it for public space, then it's not available for affordable housing and vice versa. So even among the progressives who are trying to get all these different things, there are conflicts. So you have to be very, very careful about this. It's a political issue. It's a value judgment, ultimately. There's no right or wrong. I won't talk about TDR right now, transfer of development rights. That's a little tweak on the system of incentive zoning, or selling air rights, selling development rights.
Yes, yeah.
Hi, I'm Rohit. I'm an estate consultant. I don't understand this term POPs. once when the trading has happened and the developer has been benefited of it, why shouldn't the space become a public space altogether? The private sector should be completely out of it. And that can be obtained through legislation, isn't it? And the other thing that can be thought of in this regard is that if the space has been dedicated for public use, it ought to be, let's say, open to sky. So if it is open to sky, the private sector cannot use it in any other surreptitious way.
Okay.
Why can't legislation do that?
Okay. So first of all, the city of New York does not want to own these spaces, does not want to be responsible for maintaining these spaces. They would hate your idea. I'm not saying it's a bad idea, but they would hate your idea. So they would say it's a bad idea. The cities just don't want it. They love the idea that it's, with the private sector, they maintain it, they pay for repairs, they oversee it. And by the way, there's been too little of caring that they're not doing a good job, the private sector. So that's one thing. Some people have said, give it to the city. No city wants it, all right? That's the reality. As far as open to the sky, I don't know, you tell me. Would you like to have in Mumbai a number of privately owned public spaces that are actually interior spaces? You're walking down the sidewalk, there it is, you can go in, it's air conditioned, it has some food, it has some seating. I don't know, I think that would be nice in Mumbai. So there are outdoor spaces, there are indoor spaces. That has to be determined by cities. I would think in a very hot city, and New York City can be hot also, but Mumbai even hotter, it's nice to have some indoor spaces as well. By the way, they're trickier in terms of guaranteeing that they're open to the public. I would say in general there's been more privatization on some of the interior spaces than exterior, but it's been across the board violations.
Hi, my name is Rohit. So actually in Mumbai I think it's...
Are you an architect?
Yeah, sorry. I'm an urban development practitioner working with the government, and I'm an architect as well. So my question, actually it comes from a small comment, like in Mumbai I think it's publicly owned private space rather than the privately owned public space, because there are a lot of public spaces which are privately leased, and like for example which are only used by a certain section of the society, right? So the problem is much more complex here. My question is around land ownership, right? Because like in the context which you have been talking about, like much more developed context, if I kind of think from a binary lens for the lack of a better word, the definition of boundaries, the property registrations are much more defined, where the private starts, where public ends, where public starts, private ends. Whereas it's much more complicated in a context like India and a lot of developing countries basically, where there are multiple claims on a piece of land, which can range from a central government to state government to a private land to a collector office to a PMC to an NMC, and there are a lot of further layers between. So how do you understand and tackle this land ownership issue in a context like Mumbai or Dhaka or Colombo or Rio?
So you've said two interesting things. With regard to land ownership, yes, to be sure, around the world there are disputes. Some cities have clearer records. You really know who owns it. In other cities, it's owned by 30 people, of which 29 are dead, and the other one has moved to, I don't know, Tokyo or whatever. So that's an issue. That's here in Mumbai, and it's in a lot of cities around the world. Okay, fine. But here, and again, I'm not suggesting this, but the large developers who are building, for example, luxury housing, they know what the boundaries are of their parcels of land. So it's not everywhere, and you have to deal with those problems. You just deal with those problems. I'm a lawyer, I'm a planner, but as a lawyer, I deal with that kind of problem all of the time. So yes, it's a problem, but I'm a yes person. We talked about NIMBY, not in my backyard. I'm YIMBY, yes in my backyard. I'm a yes lawyer. How can I make it happen? How can I make it work? Now, with regard to what you said about, publicly owned private space, let me be clear, ownership is not destiny. So there is, just because something is publicly owned doesn't mean it's accessible to the public. I don't know, I don't think I can walk into the Navy base, here without perhaps being arrested, or let alone something worse happening to me. So there's all sorts of publicly owned, I can't walk into the mayor's office. It's public, I'm here, no. So it doesn't mean that it's necessarily less private in an odd way, even though it's publicly owned. And let me say one other thing. In New York City, in part of the study I did, right below City Hall, literally right at City Hall, downtown, there is a park, all right? And it was a nice park. The city decided to renovate it. So it spent, I don't know, I forget how much millions of dollars. It renovated it, all right? Afterwards, there was suddenly a letter to the mayor at the time from a kid who used to throw a football. By the way, in the United States, football is not football here. It's a different kind of, it's throwing a football. He was stopped by, guards at the park before he could do it. So he wrote a letter to the mayor and said, you've turned the public park into a private space. It's public. And interestingly, I'll mention this as well. You all know about Occupy Wall Street. You heard about that. There were Occupies everywhere in the world. It wasn't just, it started in Barcelona. So downtown, there is a privately owned public space called Zuccotti Park. It says park, but it's a privately owned public space, just as I've described it. So Occupy Wall Street, the movement, the people, one day descended on this privately owned public space, okay, and occupied it. That was Occupy Wall Street. It was several blocks from Wall Street. And they stayed there for about 10 weeks. Now, 3 blocks away was City Hall Park that I just referenced, okay? Every park in New York City closes at dusk, opens at dawn. This privately owned public space by law was required to be open 24 hours a day. So whether it was serendipitous or deep tactical or strategy, they alighted on a space, privately owned, where they had more rights than they would have had in a public park. Now, it was also closer to Wall Street, and they weren't going up against government. But that's what happened. And I was getting calls from gazillions of reporters. What the hell is this thing? And what are the rules about it and the law and all of this? Because nobody knew. It was a privately owned public space. And by the way, the owner had to go to the city. The owner contacted Mayor Bloomberg, help us out. These people are trespassing. I don't know, are they? It's open to the public. The rules, by the way, when Occupy Wall Street went to the space, I didn't show the sign, but it said no rollerblading, no skateboarding, no bicycling. Those were the 3 rules posted by the private owner. Well, Occupy Wall Street weren't doing any of those things. So they went there and occupied it. 3 weeks later, there was a taped sign that was removed that said, no sleeping bags, no shopping carts, and that was actually adopted by the Real Estate Board of New York and spread around every single pops in the city, all right? And by the way, who says you can't sleep? I'm not saying you can. I mean, the doctor is not here, I guess he's out inventing some great...
You got to call.
Okay, well, he's probably the Nobel Prize or something. but so I'm not making light of these kinds of things, but you have to figure out what does it mean public use? Who's a member of the public? And for me, by the way, unhoused individuals, quite frankly, if society doesn't provide them with anywhere else to go, then they can use this space. Now, that doesn't mean if they come up to me sitting there and start screaming in my face that I have to tolerate that. At that point, I call over the guard and say, get rid of this person. But by the way, if they sit next to me, they haven't taken a shower or bath in weeks and weeks and weeks, they smell, it's unpleasant, and I'm sitting there, I don't like that. I don't think necessarily any of us, or maybe most of us, I don't know, would somebody like that? I really don't. But so what? They have a right to sit right there. If I want to get up, fine, or they have, so what? They're not doing anything wrong. They are if they scream at me or punch me, but if they're just sitting there and they smell or whatever, that's a member of the public.
Sure.
Yeah, my name is Jerold Kayden. I'm a civil engineer and urban planner. You said FSI and FAR are the same thing. They're absolutely not. With FSI, you can have a 350 square foot letterbox, which is not counted in FSI. You can have a 750 square foot lily pond in your apartment, which is not counted in FSI. Would you not count those as FAR?
No. And here's the thing. So this is where you're a great person, a great man, highly respected, and I very humbly have to disagree with you, and I'm sorry about that. FAR has lots of exclusions. For example, in an office tower, mechanical space doesn't count as FAR, okay? Basement doesn't count as FAR. I live in Cambridge, Massachusetts. 3 years ago, the basement of my house counted as FAR. 2 years ago, the city amended the zoning and said from now on, basements won't count. Why? Because they wanted to encourage affordable housing, all right? Roof decks, is it FAR or not? In other words, FAR in different cities, by the way, in the United States is defined differently, and some space applies and some don't. Same thing with FSI. People think, and understand, by the way, the website that I referenced thinks that FAR by definition is every square foot in the building, you know, from the interior glass throughout the building. That just happens to be wrong. It's simply not true. And indeed, developers take advantage of that, and they get extra height by having huge mechanical space. So the city, you know, with very, very high mechanical space. So the city has now talked about introducing height limits. So there are lots of space that is withdrawn. And by the way, interestingly, with regard to POPs, there was a building that got bonus space and had a POPs, okay? So that was the trade. It decided it no longer wanted the POPs, but it had all this bonus square feet and it was required to have it. So you know what it did? It created a huge mechanical space. And that suddenly removed, you know, that square footage that was the bonus space. Suddenly they didn't have to they weren't required to provide the POPs. So it varies. The definition, there's gross square feet, zoning square feet, net square feet, and you know, what counts, what doesn't count. So I appreciate, you know, and
same all over the world.
Same all over the world. Yeah. They both start with F.
The impression we have from this talk is that POPs are a good thing. And I think there is one negative aspect of POPs, and that is the densification that takes place. 20% more population in the same area, sharing the same amenities, and that's a negative which is not assessed because it's not tangible.
Right. Well, you know, so it's interesting. I think I did reference this kind of trade-off. You're absolutely right. And I said, isn't it bizarre that the city gives a floor area bonus, which means extra density, 20% as you said, in return for a plaza at the base of the building, which they call, in reference conceptually, a density ameliorating amenity. In other words, this plaza is meant to address the negative effects of density that they've just added to by adding, you know, it's a funny kind of thing. There are people who say, give me a break, FARs are not scientifically precise. 15 is no different than 18. Well, I say, maybe you're right. You're a civil engineer. You would know better than I would know. But let me say this. You gotta draw a line somewhere. You know, this is always the case. I do a lot of work on zoning. I've written a book about zoning. And, you know, there are district lines. This is a residential district, and this is a commercial district. And there's a line between them. And I guarantee you that when I'm here in the residential district, and here in the commercial district, I just, you know, walk across it. The land is exactly identical. There's no difference. Why can't I be commercial? Why can't I be residential? And my answer is, you have to draw a line somewhere. And you know, that is the answer. So there are people who say there's no difference between 15 and 18. I think there is. And certainly there is between 15 and 30. We've got a district in New York, right next to around Grand Central Terminal, where the FAR legally is allowed by providing all sorts of amenities, especially subway connections and expanded subway stops. You can get to 30 FAR. Also, part of that going from 15 to 30 is buying development rights from churches and synagogues and mosques, etc., temples all around the city of New York, thereby preserving them as temples and mosques, etc. In other words, buying their otherwise unused development rights.
What do you think of the notion of abandoning FSI altogether?
Well,
until 1961, it wasn't there. The whole world was built.
Correct.
Without FSI,
the biggest fad today, I'm calling it a fad, that's a little bit unfair, is in fact getting rid of FAR. This is called form-based zoning, or form-based codes, or form-based laws. And the idea is you get rid of FAR, a density limitation. You get rid of use restrictions, okay? And the only thing you regulate is the shape of the building, period. Now that's interesting to think about. The new urbanists in, you know, Andreas Guani and Elizabeth Plater-Zyberg and Leon Creer in England, it's something that's very popular.
Cities have adopted it.
Yeah, absolutely, totally, completely form-based. And so, but look, first of all, through form-based zoning, you can control uses and you can control bulk in the sense of saying, you know, it's a 35-foot height limit. or a 100-foot height limit, okay? I mean, so that necessarily stops you, even if you occupy the whole lot. I can tell you the maximum bulk that that produces, but I have to calculate it without knowing it. And also, I've said with certain uses, I mean, forms can't guarantee the kinds of uses you want. We have some wonderful historic areas in Boston, just as you have in Mumbai and around the world. And these historic buildings, wonderful form, are used by real estate brokers and banks. You know, so the form doesn't guarantee that there are uses that don't activate the street particularly. So there I would say you need to do use zoning. So I play around with my class. What about use-only zoning? Or what, you know, you can have fun with that. So it's happening. It's a real thing. So you're spot on.
Yeah, go ahead.
My name is Abhijit. I'm urban planner by education, and I'm the first town planner in India from the private sector. And so that's how I have seen both sides of public interest as well as the private interest by serving this function.
So can you clarify what that means? The first town planner from?
First town planning officer from the private sector. So I have given building approvals being employee of a private company.
All right, I would have to explain more what that means.
No, you should explain more. Okay.
I mean, as
And
you
by the way,
know,
are we going to have to be here for another hour on this explanation? Because you know, dinner is
depends on how quickly the people understand.
No, okay.
I mean,
Wow.
the town planning officer was.
This is a smart
Amazing
audience. Go ahead, sorry.
Okay,
I was just
so
kidding.
I think most of the architects here will know that the building permissions are given by the municipality.
Yeah, the public sector.
Yeah, and there is an officer who gives all this approval.
Public
So I was
employee.
that.
Yes.
I'm sorry?
So I played that role.
So you-
While I
You
was-
used to be.
Yeah.
And now you're no longer, now you work for the private
Now I'm
sector.
doing more creative things.
Okay.
Okay, good for you. I think that's great.
Okay. So first a simple question, if it does not take you very long to answer. You talked about the quality of box. I mean, all that numbers added up to 57. So what happens to the 43?
I'm sorry, what happened to the 43? There was marginal, 41% marginal. What happened to them?
41 plus 16, so 57% POPs quality you
You
still
said
get.
excellent, man.
No, right. As I said, the word I used was a mixed record with regard to quality. Great record with regard to quantity, but mixed record with regard to quality. Some POPs are very, very good, and I showed them 3% destination, 13%.
He's adding 30.
Yeah, no, and I'm doing that. You know, you get to, I said it was 41%, not 43. 41% were bad. Marginal was the word. So you've added up, and guess what? I can take 100 minus 41, and I can get the same number, right? Which is, so 59% are okay or better. Is that a good record? To me, that's a bad record. It's mixed, I can call it mixed. It should be 100%, okay?
So I take it as 43% were not worth talking about. Fine. Second is that,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, it was actually quite surprising to know that, I mean, how so many wrong things happened for so much long time. I mean, sitting here, I already had ideas of what I would have done, like, you know, the improvements to save ourselves from this situation. But it's surprising that nobody did it in those times, right? I mean, people like Sirish Patel have been existing for centuries.
See, I didn't say that. I mean, you know, it's like today somebody referred to Raul Mehrotra as a foreign architect. That's ridiculous. You know? So, look.
Okay, but the question is that why did, I mean, as you said that later, I think after 1975, if I got it correctly, I mean, why they could not think of really beneficial, you know, solutions for urban population or product they did not need it. I mean, like my most friends would agree that in Bombay we need many solutions, which were not required there.
So let me answer.
Thank you.
Right.
Yeah.
First of all, there are very dedicated town planners, we call them city planners, doesn't that? Very dedicated people on staff. In fact, Jaime, are you here? Yeah. Oh, you guys. LA, you're right, sitting almost right directly in front of you are two public planners. By the way, now they're going into real estate, so they want to make money. Doing good, affordable housing and all sorts of other wonderful things. So they were very dedicated staff people. It's just that they couldn't get the law changed. So they would go off in their spare time, visit POPs, and say, this is illegal, and they try to get them changed. I mean, they were very, very dedicated. So I'm not criticizing them. You know, the city, for a variety of reasons that we could discuss in other cities, don't change the law. You know, partially it's because of who, you know, has power in the city, all right? But the other thing, there's actually a very interesting sort of story about what people really thought back in 1961. So, the people who made this thing up, incentive zoning for plazas and arcades, I don't think they really thought of a plaza as something that would really be used by the public. What I think they thought they were creating was a space in front of the building that would set the building back and be the tower in the park or the tower in the plaza. I mean, they didn't demand chairs, they didn't demand tables, they didn't demand food, they didn't demand landscaping. So to me, it was more of an architectural statement. And one great story that the architect Philip Johnson told, so I said he assisted Mies van der Rohe on the Seagram building, which is a very famous international style tower in New York. I showed it to you in 1958. So Philip Johnson walks out of the Seagram building with Mies, and there are people in the Seagram Plaza. And Philip Johnson recounts how Mies was surprised that people were sitting in his plaza with the feet in the water using it. Why? He didn't think it was for public use, but people were using it. So that attitude began to change as more and more of these rotten, sterile, vacant spaces were created. I mean, they were scattering all over the city, and people started to see them and began to realize that something has to be done about it. But 14 years, that's a long time. And most of the 41% are, of course, in that first 14 years, which is why, to me, I'm interested in improving the rotten spaces. So I have a program called Adopt a Public Space. And I don't mean me as a person, but I mean nearby NGOs. Lincoln Center is the perfect example. They're very powerful, very rich. There was a public space right next to them. I showed it to you with a climbing wall. The owners of the building wanted to have nothing to do with the space. Lincoln Center wanted to have a space where they could sell tickets and give out information and start tours of Lincoln Center. So they came to me. They knew I was interested in the Adopt a Pops program. The president of Lincoln Center came to me. I went to him, and we worked on this together. We went to the city, and lo and behold, Lincoln Center rented that space, put in $27 million, and now it's a vibrant space used by Lincoln Center. So again, it's a little bit of a neoliberal, even though Lincoln Center is not for profit, but not really. But still, it's much better space, all right? And so I want to improve existing spaces, and there are ways of doing it, and Adopt a Space is a, one sort of innovative plan.
Yeah. My name is Jerold. I work with an environmental NGO based in Mumbai. FSI is a very contentious issue in the city, so great numbers came to play. And that's when Rahul, when he's introduced to mention carrying capacity and so on. And in my opinion, the city can't support unlimited, unrestricted FSI growth. And we live in a city where the building plan is sanctioned, the buildings come up, and then they start thinking about the infrastructure to support this kind of buildings. So I would like some feedback from you on that. And the second thing is, I don't know, we should call these guys builders, I don't know whether they became developers. So.
The second one is just a statement. Look, this is the technique. It was this trade, very inventive, free lunch, all the things that I mentioned. And there's something funny about it. Again, the connection between FSI or FAR and the carrying capacity of infrastructure, you would think that civil engineers and others really understand it, to a very precise amount. First of all, it isn't that precise. I mean, I don't know that there's certainly no difference between 15 FAR and 15.1, or 6 FSI and 6.1 FSI, okay? Is there a difference between 15 and 18 or 6 and 8? We begin to have a difference, and obviously if you go to 30 from 15, there is a real difference, all right? But cities, and this is the question for all of you, for us, for everybody, are you willing to say as a city, we will tolerate less carrying capacity or overburdening our infrastructure capacity? So it will be more crowded on the sidewalk. It'll take longer to get from point A to point B driving. But you know what? We're going to have more affordable housing. And we're willing to make that trade-off. Now, I'm not going to tell a city that certainly legally it can't do it. As a policy judgment that a city can make. I don't know what the right answer is. There's no right answer. We could take a vote here. Maybe everybody would say, oh, carrying capacity. I don't know, you get an extra 100 units of affordable housing. You know, these are decisions that are made all the time. It's guns and butter. You know, do you spend money on social services or do you spend money on military defense? And this is classic judgments that city councils, town councils, panchayats around the world are making all the time. You know, between very disparate things. I don't know. I don't know how to balance those things, but we do it nonetheless. And we can't do it, let's do a cost-benefit analysis. Ridiculous. It can't be done that way. So ultimately, we're just making a judgment. And I don't know what you would say if I said you could get 1,000 extra units of affordable housing, and the street will be a little more crowded than the sidewalk. I'm not, by the way, trying to put you on the spot. I don't know what the answer is, but do you have any thoughts?
Well, I think in Mumbai we are running out of water.
Okay.
The air is unbreathable, and so on. And I can just go on and on.
Right.
And on.
So your answer is it's just impossible. The infrastructure is so. I mean, we cannot afford to do it. Okay, so that technique will not be then used for affordable housing, and that sounds like a completely reasonable answer or judgment or decision.
Yes, this is my mic.
Thanks. I'm Jasmine Saluja. I'm an urban designer and have a practice called True. This is just a quick factual question. Like you said, it's optional when a building is made to have POPs. So how many percentage, what's the percentage of buildings which do not opt to go for POPs? That is something I'm just curious to know. And also, is it related to the land price of that area? Because in the map you showed they are all kind of clustered in a particular area. This comes very similar to the question of like SRA, since you know about the policy. It's spread across to the entire state, but it's only Mumbai and certain parcels in Mumbai which utilizes this policy. You know, although free housing can be made available in the entire state, but it doesn't happen that way. So similarly, is it attached to land? How many do not do? Because from 61 to 24, if we have 598 POPs, then how popular is POPs?
So to begin with, I can't give you a precise number of office buildings and residential towers that did not take advantage of incentive zoning. I can tell you that the great majority did, but we never did a count going to buildings that were 15 FAR, and they just didn't do it. We were so focused on, just getting the data on the buildings that did do it. But I absolutely know for a fact, if I had a guess, I would say between 90 and 95% of buildings took advantage of the bonus. And by the way, all that proves to me is, it was financially worthwhile. It made money for them. And this is the thing, had the city been a better real estate financial analyst, or not even better, had it done it, it could have given away maybe 10 million square feet or 5 million square feet, which by the way would help you because there'd be, instead of having 20 million square feet occupied by people, it would be 5 million square feet, a lot less, and that would be better for water, streets, sidewalks, all that sort of thing. So there's a real cost to doing it that way. As far as land prices go, it's a very interesting question of who actually gets the benefit of an incentive. And I don't want to get technical, but is it the landowner? I mean, the minute the city of New York enacted this kind of thing, people knew, developers knew, that they could build bigger buildings and make more money. So if I own the land and a developer comes to me, I say, well, you can make more money now, so I'm going to charge more for the land. We call that capitalizing the value into the land. So did it go into the land or did it go to the developers? I did an economic study on that, and most of it went to developers. But it's also very, very hard to do that kind of economic analysis. Okay. And by the way, one final thing, can I just say this? Yes, you're right. I showed a map. I didn't show all of Manhattan. There's POPs downtown, POPs midtown, Upper East Side, Upper West Side, some in Queens, some in Brooklyn. But I said, guess where they're located. They are located where there's a market that wants to occupy bonus square feet. If you go to Harlem or Bedford-Stuyvesant or other poor neighborhoods in New York City, nobody's building a tower to begin with. Not nobody, there's some in Harlem now. But it's hard enough to just get a developer to build a 10 FAR building. They're not saying, oh my God, I want to build 15. If I can only build 3 FAR more, that would be fantastic. Whereas here, everybody wants to 66 stories, 80 stories, So it only happens where there's a market demand, which introduces the equity problem that I mentioned, which is only well-to-do areas get the plazas. So you have to create a system where, yes, you can give the bonuses where people will want the bonuses, the developers, but what they give is off-site and for poor people. Whether it's giving money that can pay for it, or they actually build it or enter into an agreement off-site so that everybody benefits from these amenities.
We're going to do one last question. I know some of you want your second questions, and he'll be around and you can catch him, but we need to wrap.
Yes, my name is Goethe-Institut. I'm an urban design architect. Actually, her question, brought another interesting point is when there is an option of people to opt out. Actually, that should have come in the very beginning. That there is a choice basically that square feet per square feet you have so and so. So, as an urban designer, what happens to my street character? What happens to the whole idea of cohesive urban space? The street section doesn't change every 50 meters.
So it's an excellent question. Urban design was not a consideration when this was introduced at all. And you can see why. This building here decides, and by the way, you don't opt out, you opt in. So I decide I'll provide a plaza, I want the bonus, so I provide a plaza here. The building next door, I want a bonus, provide a plaza here. Next door. So, and by the way, nobody's looking at all of these things together. There were no rules about if there's a plaza here, there can't be a plaza here or here. You can only have so many plazas on a street or a block front, etc. So there's a very famous 2-block, 3-block area on 6th Avenue in New York where buildings that are called the XYZ buildings were erected. These are towers, again, classic international style towers, and they have 3 huge plazas in front of them. One of them I showed, which was that water element, and then it was blocked off. That was the Exxon building. And these things, suddenly you're walking on a sidewalk, and then, there are these deep plazas. And over time, that was the zeitgeist of the moment. How terrific. And then people realized, guess what? Street walls are actually great with buildings. So that became the urban design mantra. Let's have street walls. The tyranny of street walls, the tyranny of plazas. What you really need is somebody who's a good urban designer like you to say, look, let's figure out what can happen in this opt-in program, this voluntary program. We're not requiring things, so we don't know who's going to say yes, who's going to say no. So set it up in advance that there are certain rules that say, for example, if there's a plaza, on X block front, there can't be another one within, 500 feet or whatever. I can create the rules, performance standards rules, that at least introduce to some degree urban design. I said it's a random archipelago of 598 spaces. Why didn't somebody think about how can we arrange these in such a way that it makes sense? Now, there were a few exceptions to this, and I'll close on this. Between 6th Avenue and 7th Avenue in New York, they decided, why not have through-block arcades, which are covered spaces through block, going south to north or north to south, mid-block. So the block is very long between 6th Avenue and 7th Avenue. It's a long walk going east to west or west to east if you know New York. So why don't we put a through-block arcade in the middle, and that'll allow people in the middle of the block to go north or to go south. And so they did that, and there's a 7-block stretch where basically the through-block arcades connect up. And you can walk from, basically 49th Street, as I recall, all the way to 57th Street, mid-block. You don't have to go to the sidewalk anywhere. You can do it mid-block. Now, what's bizarre is, at a certain street, there were suddenly 2 through-block arcades. And you know what? Gee, do I take that one or that one? Man, you didn't need that. But that was an idea of urban design. And by the way, that narrow corridor has now been known as 6th and a half Avenue. It's not 7th and it's not 6th. And it's there. And it's sort of interesting. And I've done a study on through-block connections. Those are which are mid-block, those are the easiest to think of in urban design terms because you want to have not just one, but wouldn't it be great to have 5 in a row so that you have another pathway. However, and I will literally close on this, there was a very, very famous group of architects in New York City. And by the way, I don't just study New York. I really look at a lot of other cities that we're talking about this, called the Urban Design Group. I don't know whether you've heard of this, but it had very famous architects on it, Jack Robertson, Richard Weinstein, Jonathan Barnett, et cetera, and a really good lawyer, an we're seeing there. And they had all sorts of inventive ideas with regard to land use regulations, and in particular zoning. And in fact, they operated in an era where implementation strategies was part of urban design. Mel and I know about this. You know, urban design as a field, as a profession, it's not a discipline, has cycled between morphological approaches, Colin Rowe, Aldo Rossi, et cetera, for those of you who are not architects, I apologize for the moment. So totally form-based. And then it cycles to implementation as part of urban design. I mean, I call myself an urban designer. I'm not an architect, and I don't really say that in, you know, I say it to Raul. There are colleagues of mine that I wouldn't say it to their face for reasons you and I understand. But in any event, but I like zoning. I mean, I actually design huge swaths of the city, far more, by the way, than an architect may, because I'm drafting the law that determines the form. Now, by the way, I don't make my own aesthetic choice or use choice. I rely on great designers to help me with that, and I'm really implementing what they're doing. But that's part of urban design, and I want urban designers to do a lot more of that. So you've got to think of it this way. Jack Robertson and his urban design group, Fifth Avenue, sidewalks are too crowded. Sidewalks are too crowded. Oh my God, it's a shopping street. You know, you can't even walk, it's so crowded. So what did they do? They created through block connection, 3 blocks, taking people off of Fifth Avenue. Really? I get it, it's crowded, but it's also fantastic. It's incredible, it's wonderful, and that's where the retail is. So would you really want to take people off of it? And I get it, you know, I can understand in some cases the answer is you're damn right. Okay? And that might be a way of reducing, you know, what's on the sidewalk, et cetera. These are urban design decisions that get made. But some people have criticized that as sapping life from this great shopping street called Fifth Avenue.
And you know, Jerold, when you, I mean, I'm just sort of looking at your title, and thanks for this sort of discussion and presentation. You said creating FSI 4. It could be many things, right? You've given us one example of what you've studied, and then lessons from practice. And I think for me the big takeaway is exactly that FSI, FAR, in its fundamental conception, is about its relationship to infrastructure. Now, there are many possible incentives, disincentives, tweaks that can take you to, you know, do different things. And I suppose the lesson really is how one gets into anticipatory planning to imagine what the implications are. Often this is done in a real hurry, and therefore one doesn't understand the implications, whether it's implications as urban designers might see it in terms of urban form, or precise metrics like water, and therefore use these as correlations, and that's, you know, fantastic. One of Jerold's most sort of popular quotes among his students is Jerold always says, to design and plan is human, but to implement divine. Right? Thank you.